The rain had been falling since late afternoon, steady and soft at first, like a shy visitor tapping at the windows. By evening, it had deepened into a rhythmic drumming, steady as a heartbeat, filling the little stone cottage with a sound both soothing and isolating. Outside, the world blurred, trees melted into shadowy shapes, their branches sagging under the weight of water. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of damp wood and the faint trace of lavender from the fire-warmed blankets. Isabel sat curled in her chair, a book resting half open on her lap, though she hadn't turned a page in over 20 minutes. She wasn't reading anymore. She was listening. Listening to the rain, yes, but also to the way it seemed to carry whispers. She had always loved storms. They gave her an excuse to stay indoors without guilt, to light the hearth and brew tea, to lose herself in worlds made of words. But tonight felt different. There was a heaviness to the weather, as if the clouds were not simply spilling rain but pressing the sky downward. A low fog clung to the hills, and the forest beyond the cottage looked impossibly dark, its outlines shifting like something alive. Isabel caught herself glancing toward the window more often than usual, each time expecting to see. What, exactly? She couldn't say. The feeling was neither fear nor excitement, but a strange mixture of both. Like being on the brink of a story you haven't yet been told. The kettle whistled sharply, startling her into motion. She poured the steaming water over dried chamomile blossoms, watching the pale gold tendrils curl upward, scenting the air with something calming and floral. But even as she breathed it in, she couldn't shake the pull of the outside world. She moved to the window and pressed her fingertips to the cold glass. Beyond the rain-slicked panes, the path leading into the forest glistened faintly under the scattered light of the oil lamp. She imagined footsteps there, splashing softly in the puddles, an image so vivid that her chest tightened, though no one was in sight. When the knock came, it was almost too gentle to hear over the storm. A single tap, then another, then silence. Isabel froze, her breath caught somewhere between her throat and her lungs. In her years living here, visitors were rare, and unannounced visitors at night were unheard of. She set her cup down and approached the door slowly, feeling the old wooden boards shift slightly beneath her weight. Another knock, firmer this time. She hesitated, then drew back the latch and opened the door just a crack. A man stood there, though man seemed too simple a word for what she saw. His shoulders filled the doorway, his cloak dripping rain onto the threshold, and his eyes, deep, amber, and unblinking, held hers with a strange intensity. His features were striking, almost beautiful, but edged with something wild, untamed. Behind him, the forest swayed, and for an instant, Isabel thought she saw something else moving in the shadows beyond, something large and hulking, a shape that vanished the moment she blinked. Mark froze. He told himself it was a branch, a trick of the wind. But then came a second knock, slow, deliberate, and low to the ground. The lantern wavered again, light spilling across the window. Nothing there but raindrops, until a faint outline appeared. Someone, or something, was crouching just beyond the glass. He lunged for the door, slamming the bolt shut, though the figure had already vanished. His breath fogged in the air. The temperature inside had dropped at least 10 degrees. He grabbed his phone, but the signal bar was gone, replaced by a single word, listening. He stared at it, blinking. When he tried to power it off, it refused. The storm outside raged harder, as if mocking his panic. He whispered to himself, "There's no one out there," and repeated it like a prayer. But every time he said it, the knocking returned, this time from the back of the cabin. It was moving around him. Mark ran to the bedroom, dragging a dresser against the door. Lightning flashed, illuminating the window for an instant. A face stared back, pale, drenched, mouth slightly open as if mid-breath. Then it was gone. He didn't sleep that night. He just sat on the floor, waiting for the rain to stop. It didn't. Morning came, but the storm didn't fade. The radio, dead for hours, crackled to life. At first it was just static, then a voice, distant but clear, saying his name. "Mark, are you awake?" He leaned in close, whispering, "Who is this?" The voice laughed softly. "It's still raining, isn't it?" Then silenced, he tore through the wires, ripping the radio from the wall. But even without power, the voice continued, muffled through the speaker. "Don't look outside yet," it said. His pulse quickened, And against all logic, he did. There were footprints in the mud, leading from the trees to his porch. But they didn't stop there. They led up the wall. Mark backed away from the window. The voice on the radio turned faint again, like a lullaby under static. 3 hours until it stops, it said. Just don't let them in. He wanted to scream, to run, but the sound of dripping inside the room froze him where he stood. The dripping sound wasn't coming from the ceiling. It was coming from the walls themselves. A dark stain spread across the wooden panels, thick and slow. He touched it, cold, sticky, not rainwater. Blood. He stumbled back, knocking over the lantern. It shattered, plunging the cabin into half-light. The smell of rust filled the air. Something behind the wall began moving, faint scratches, like nails dragging against wood. He grabbed his coat, thinking to make a run for it, but the door handle was slick and trembling, as if someone was holding it from the other side. He whispered, "Please, stop." The handle twisted once, then let go. Mark ran for the back door, but when he opened it, the rain had turned pitch black. It wasn't water anymore. It was thicker, oily, reflecting no light. Every drop that touched his skin burned. He slammed the door shut and fell to the ground, clutching his arm where the black rain had touched. It left a handprint, his own, burned into his skin, and somewhere outside, a second Mark screamed. He woke up hours later, unsure if he had slept or blacked out. The storm had eased, but a soft glow lit the cabin. The mirror in the corner, one he had covered long ago, was uncovered to eye in the reflection. The cabin looked different, brighter, untouched by the storm. And in the chair opposite him sat himself. The other Mark smiled faintly, then stood up, mimicking his movements with eerie precision as he stepped closer to the mirror. His reflection did the same, but a beat too slow, just like before. Then the other Mark raised his hand and pressed it against the glass. Without thinking, Mark mirrored the gesture. Cold spread through his fingers. The reflection whispered something he couldn't hear. Then, from the other side, a single droplet of water ran down the glass, upward. When he turned around, his reflection didn't move. It just stared, smiling wider. The clock on the wall read 2:13 a.m. The voice on the dead radio had said 3 hours until it stopped. That meant one more hour of this, one more hour of rain and madness. Mark sat in the dark, clutching the burned mark on his arm. It pulsed faintly, syncing with the sound of the rain. He realized the storm wasn't random. It had rhythm, pattern, almost a heartbeat. Then, from outside, he heard his name again, this time in his own voice. Mark opened the door. He froze. "It's you," it continued. "You locked yourself out." He wanted to believe it was a trick. But when he peered through the peephole, the other Mark was there, drenched, smiling faintly, holding the same burn mark on his arm. "Let me back in," it said. Mark backed away from the door. He whispered, "You're not me." And the thing outside whispered back, "Not yet." The rain softened, then stopped entirely. The silence was deafening. Mark stood in the center of the room, holding the broken lantern like a weapon. The air smelled clean again, too clean that he dared to open the door. The forest was quiet. The footprints were gone, but something in the air felt wrong. The cabin's windows were dark mirrors now, reflecting the inside but showing faint movements that weren't real. That he turned on his phone, praying for service. One bar flickered to life. A single text appeared, "You survived the wrong night." The phone rang before he could respond. A voice whispered through, "It's not over when the rain stops." Then, thunder again. Though the sky above was clear, Mark looked down. The ground beneath his feet was wet. The rain had started again, but this time, only inside the cabin. Water poured from the ceiling, pooling around his feet. It rose faster than it should have, filling the room in minutes. The windows were pitch black now, like gaping holes in reality. He swam toward the door, pushing against an unseen force. As the water rose to his chest, objects began floating past him. His notebook, the radio, the mirror. Each showed flashes of faces, people he didn't recognize, all whispering the same word. He dove beneath the surface, searching for a way out, and saw something at the bottom, a trapdoor. He pried it open, lungs burning, and dropped through into darkness. He landed in a dry corridor, narrow and cold. The rain above echoed distantly, like the memory of a storm. There were markings on the walls, his own handwriting, repeating a date. November 5th. That was today. Mark followed the tunnel, his footsteps echoing. The air grew warmer, almost humid. At the end of the corridor stood a door, identical to his cabin's front door that he turned the knob. On the other side was his cabin, but cleaner, brighter, untouched by any storm. He stepped inside, relieved, until he saw himself again, sitting in the same chair, staring blankly ahead. This version of himself didn't move. The air shimmered, like heat distortion, and he understood. He had been here before. The cycle was repeating. The storm wasn't outside. It was inside him. The static voice returned, distant but clearer now. 3 hours, every night, it said. Until you open the wrong door. Mark whispered, "Which door is that?" The voice replied, "The one you just opened." The rain outside the pavilion hadn't slowed. If anything, it grew heavier, drumming harder against the tin roof, a rhythm that seemed to merge with the soldier's words. Matthew leaned back against the bench, his hands pressed flat against his knees, the muscles in his jaw tightening as he continued. When we realized Morales was missing, we assumed he'd gotten turned around in the dark. It wasn't impossible. Storms can disorient you, and the woods have a way of swallowing landmarks. But Morales wasn't a rookie. He knew those trails as well as anyone. We combed the perimeter until dawn, but there was nothing. No broken branches. No drag marks. No sound of struggle. Just nothing. That emptiness does something to you. He described how the next night, they doubled their watch shifts. No one wanted to admit it, but the unease was contagious. Soldiers don't like mysteries. They're trained to find causes, strategies, enemy intent. But this was different. "We'd hear it again," Matthew said, lowering his voice, footsteps moving just beyond the tree line. Too light to be a bear. Too quick to be human. He mimicked the pattern. 3 steps, a pause, then 2 more. Never closer, never farther. Always at the same distance, like something was deliberately staying just out of sight. He admitted that a couple of the younger men joked about ghosts in the woods, but he didn't laugh when he told us. He stared out into the rain like the sound was replaying in his head that on the 3rd night, he drew patrol duty with another soldier named Keegan. The storm was brutal, wind snapping branches above them, rain plastering their uniforms to their skin. They had to shout just to hear one another. At one point, their flashlight beams crossed over something strange, shallow depressions in the mud, not quite footprints, but too symmetrical to be random. The water was filling them fast, erasing detail, but Matthew swore they didn't look like boots or shoes. "If I didn't know better," he said, "I'd say they looked like hands. Open hands pressed into the earth." His eyes flickered toward us, as if to gauge whether we believed him. None of us spoke. The discovery rattled them, but Keegan, young, brash, unwilling to admit fear, pressed forward. He wanted to track whatever made the marks. Matthew followed reluctantly, sweeping the light across trunks and brush until the forest seemed alive with movement. Then, through the sheets of rain, they both saw it. A figure crouched low at the base of a tree. Too far to make out clearly, too quick to hold the light steady. It shifted, fast, almost spider-like, before vanishing behind the trunk. By the time they reached the spot, there was nothing. Just mud, water, and a fresh gust of wind that carried with it the faintest trace of a whistle. "That was the first time I thought maybe Morales hadn't gotten lost," Matthew said, his voice quiet enough to force us closer. The pavilion was dead silent now, no one scrolling phones or whispering jokes. The storm outside seemed to rage harder, as if punctuating his last words. He rubbed his palms against his knees, his gaze hard and unblinking. "That was the night I realized something out there was watching us. And it wasn't leaving.